Hi, and welcome to this video where we will be looking at doing mixdowns in Cubase. So a mixdown is the final audio file that you create after you've finished all your work in Cubase. It's the format which most people listen to because most people won't be opening up a Cubase file and listening to your work in that kind of detail. Normally falls into two camps, so you can either have a lossy file such as an MP3 where some of the audio data is thrown away to give you a smaller file size, or you can have a lossless format such as WAV where no information is thrown away. Normally if you were getting your music distributed by somewhere like Labelworks, etc., then you would give them a lossless file, a WAV file, and the same would go if you were handing in school or college work. If you just want to listen to it on a portable music player or distribute it yourself over the internet, then you would want a lossy format such as MP3. So we will look at that in a bit more detail, but we need to look at all the mechanics of producing a mixdown and also the things not to do. Okay, so we're going to try and avoid some of the pitfalls which can happen. So you can see on screen I've got a project which I've been working on. So we've got drums, bass, etc., all these things in folders. So this is the entirety of the piece. Now, the first thing we need to set is our range that we're going to be exporting. So we need to set our locators to do that. And the locators, if you haven't met them yet, are these two triangular markers on the ruler here. You can set them by dragging them about. A real quick way to do this is to select everything. So you do Control A to select all, and then you hit P. So it's not Control P, just P on the keyboard. And that sets your locators around everything you've got. So if you've been reasonably neat with where all your parts are and you haven't got a graveyard of other ideas towards the end, you will be able to just do this. But there is one thing you need to be aware of, and that is you need to leave time for audio to fade out. So here we can see in the drums folder at the end of this piece of music, we've just got some drums happening, and if we're not careful, depending on how this has worked out, we might have put the locator a bit too soon and the audio may not have faded out by the time the locator happens. So if we just play this last bit, we'll have a quick listen. Yeah, and that's nearly faded away, but I'm not entirely happy that I won't have cut something off. So I'm just going to make that bit longer. So always bear that in mind, particularly if you've been doing audio recording, then where your regions finish will be where everything finishes. But if you've got MIDI sounds, etc., and particularly if you've got lots of reverb or delay, etc., then you will need to extend that, listen to it, and make sure things aren't getting cut off, because nobody wants that. Right, so setting our locators is the first thing. The next thing we need to ensure is that only the things we want playing are playing. So in this particular project, there isn't anything that I don't want in this mixdown. So everything that's there is playing as it should be. We've got this track here. There's one track here actually which I used as part of the production earlier on, and now it's surplus to requirements, but I kept it hanging around, so that's muted. But if you're doing something where you've got a backing track, etc., or a count in, those kind of things, make sure those are muted. Otherwise you're just going to be listening to the wrong thing. So it's worth a listen through just to ensure you're not playing anything you shouldn't be, but I know in this case we haven't got that. Now the next thing is actually doing the mixdown. Now before we do that, we need to do something which will hopefully make your life a bit easier, and that is to look in the mixer at the stereo out channel. Now during the course of creating this piece of music, I've turned down the master output a number of times because the tracks that were present were louder than, well, there was quite a few of them. So we can see we've got sort of 48 tracks, including groups here, and it's meant that the level has been too high. So I've turned this down a few times, and we don't really know where we're going to be in terms of level. Now, it's really important that you get the idea that the position of the fader isn't the crucial thing. What is crucial is the actual audio output level. So to avoid distortion, we want this output in this meter here to be as high as possible without hitting 0. So ideally, we are looking for a level here on this peak level meter here of minus 0.1. That will mean it definitely isn't distorted, but it will also mean we're using as many bits as possible of the file that we are writing. So therefore, we're getting as effectively as good sound quality as we can get, but we're maximizing the signal to noise ratio and also ensuring we're getting as much resolution as possible. So come into the mixer and do two things when you start your mixdown process. The first thing would be you would reset this, which you can reset by clicking it, but we will see that when you move this, that will reset anyway. So I'm going to just reset that just by clicking on it. You see it's on -infinity. And now I'm going to set this to 0. Okay, now the reason is it makes doing the maths that we have to do later on much easier if you're working from 0. Okay, so once the mixer is set up there, we're then going to actually do the mixdown. So we're going to go to File, Export, and then Audio Mixdown. And we're going to pick our options. So the first thing we want to do is to name our file. I'm fairly organized about naming things, so I'm actually going to name this Mix 5 because I don't want to overwrite things I've been doing, and I'm going to put it in my mixdowns folder. So I would suggest that you have a mixdowns folder where all your final mixdowns go. It makes it much easier to deal with all sorts of issues later on, particularly if you want to trace through the things you've been doing. So I'm going to put that in there. Now, down the bottom here, I'm going to make sure that pool and audio track aren't ticked because I don't want to re-import that. So ensure that isn't ticked. Now, here's where we pick our file format. So we're going to look at two here. Firstly, WAV file. So this is the lossless type of file. So we're getting exactly what we would expect out of Cubase with nothing having been thrown away. So this is ideal for archive purposes, for sending off final masters wherever they need to go. So I'm going to use WAV file for that because it's fairly compatible, although AIFF files would do much the same thing. And then we need to set the sample rate and the bit depth. If your audio is going onto CD, which if it's college work, it probably will be for handing in, then all you need to pick is 44.1K, that's the sample rate of CDs, and 16-bit for bit depth. Okay, you have got other options, and by default, I think Cubase defaults to 32-bit float. Completely unnecessary for our purposes. Okay, so I think above 24-bit, there's some question whether or not it's really that worthwhile as far as our listening experience is concerned. There's definitely some argument that 24-bit would be okay, but if it's going on to if it's going on to CD, 16-bit is all you need because that's all you get on CD. And I appreciate it is possible to do it in 24-bit and then use expensive software to dither it down to 16-bit, etc. But if you're at this stage needing help with this, then you don't need to worry about that. So we'll go for 44.1 16-bit, and that would be it. So now we want to do our export. Okay, we will come back and look at MP3 options later on. So we're going to do our export, and Cubase then does the mixdown, which I will cut out to save you the time. So you can see it's doing it faster than real time, but it will do it even faster when I edit this bit out. Okay, so you can see at the end of the mixdown process, by default, Cubase will come back to this window, which can be slightly confusing because it almost gives you the feeling that it hasn't done what it was supposed to do, and that's made even stronger by the fact we've got cancel here, which implies if you cancel it, somehow the file will be deleted. It won't be. So what I would suggest you do is if you tick close window after export, next time, once it's finished, this window will disappear and you'll just go back to the mixer, which is good. Okay, so we're going to do that. Now, we can see straight away on our transport bar that we have had a clip. Okay, so that means that the audio output has been over 0 dB, or has tried to go over 0 dB more correctly, and will mean that we will have a distorted file, which is definitely not what we want. So if we go back to the mixer, we can see that during our mixdown process, this peak value here is really critical. So that says we tried to output 10.2 dB louder than we could go. So we need to reduce this by a little bit more than that to give us our ideal level. So because that was 10.2, I'm going to set this to minus 10.3. Okay, so we're going to repeat the process and overwrite the file that we've just done. So that's exactly the same. We go to File, Export, then Audio Mixdown. I'm going to click Export. It will ask if we want to overwrite that or create a unique file name. I'm just going to click Overwrite, and we have the same happy process again. So once more, we'll fast forward through that. Okay, so there we can see that the mixdown has finished, and we've ended up with a peak level on the mixer here of minus 0.2, which is absolutely fine. We could retry it at minus 10.2 and see if we get minus 0.1, but sometimes it may not work out exactly. So we'll do that for the next mixdown. And see where we get to. You see that it resets there, and we're just going to take an opportunity to look at the MP3 options, which can sometimes cause some confusion. So we'll go to File, Export Audio Mixdown as we would do before. Now this time I'm going to change under File Format. Here we're going to pick MP3, which is MPEG-1 Layer 3 file. So this is the probably most common lossy format that is available. So we click on there. Now here is where we set the bitrate, and that effectively chooses the file size, so how large your file is going to be. Depending on the settings here, you can get a file which is 1/10 of the size with some reasonable loss of quality, or more like around 1/3 of the size of the original file, and will be, for most people, indistinguishable from the original. So that's what we're going to go for. So I'd encourage you to go for that. So you get the bitrate slider, and we can see here we can pick the bitrate. Just drag it all the way to the right. That makes it the highest quality we can get for an MP3. You'd make sure we're still on 44.1. You'll notice that if you slide to the left, it decreases that. As you put it to the right, it doesn't always increase it back to where we were. So we'll just stick it on 44.1. Now you can also put in an ID3 tag. So if you click Edit ID3 tag, you can see you can put in title, artist, album, etc. All those things which allow most media players to put up suitable information and also catalog your music appropriately. But remember, of course, if you do this and then you forget about it, next time you do another MP3, it will be stamped with those same ID3, so that can sometimes fool you. So whether or not you need to worry about that is up to you, but that's easily typed here. You can put that in, and then it's just the same as doing the other one. Now you'll notice that this time it won't ask about overwriting this, because while the file name is the same, the extension is different. So this will be an MP3 file, whereas previously it would have been a WAV file. So I'm going to click export and see what we get this time. Okay, so our mixdown is finished, and as we can see, we've got a bit of a surprise. We had increased this level here by 0.1 dB, and we ended up with a significant increase here of about 0.8 dB. And this can happen for a number of reasons, but I think the most common reason is a plugin which doesn't take its reference from bars and beats time, but may well take it from a clock on the wall time. So it will behave differently with each mixdown. And as a result, you get a song where if you do the same mixdown twice, you will get a different output level. So we're just going to test that now. So I'm going to reset this, change nothing else. Let's do the mixdown again. Going to overwrite that. Okay, so we can see we've got the same result there, but still a bit of a mystery as far as this is concerned. So if we put this back to minus 10.3, and then we'll do it one more time and see what we get this time. Okay, so there's another mixdown done, and we can see moving it down 0.1 dB on here has altered this by half a dB, but it's still over. But this is the value which previously gave us minus 0.2 dB output when we were outputting the WAV file initially. We're going to do that in a separate video, which will be put up later this week. But for the time being, you can see that the mixdown process itself, as long as you get the basics right and get your levels here, you will be producing mixdowns which don't have any problems with them and will be ideal for whatever processing you need to do to them afterwards. So let's just recap on this. So you need to set your locators. Generally using Control A and then hitting P, and then making sure that the right locator is far enough on to deal with any tails you have on sounds or effects, etc. that you're using. Make sure that your tracks, where appropriate, are muted, and then go to File, Export, and Audio Mixdown. Name your file, choose where it's going to go, pick the file format, most importantly, so WAV files, generally WAV files for lossless recordings, and MP3, so MPEG-1 Layer 3 files for lossy playback. Make sure that the options here aren't ticked, because otherwise your mixdown will end up being put back into the project, and typically tick close window after export, because then you get clear confirmation that the mixdown process is complete and not the return of this window, which can be slightly confusing. If you've enjoyed these videos and found the tips in them useful, then subscribe by clicking on the MTT logo in the corner now. In addition, visit musictechtuition.com, where you'll find tips, tricks and advice, as well as information about the books that I've written, Music Tech A-Level using Cubase 8 and the Complete Guide to Music Technology using Cubase 8, which have got a wealth of information, stuff that would take years and years of YouTube videos to cover. These are a great resource whether you're just getting started or you've been sequencing for a few years. They will allow you to take your sequencing, recording and production to the next level and give you a really well-rounded education in all aspects of music technology.